Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to another Veema webinar. So today we're going to be talking about the changing way we support SEN students, and this is something that is very close to my heart because I was a pastoral leader for many years, and one of the things that was really important to me, and I know that for many educators, is to ensure that we are supporting SEN students to make the progress that they should be making, and that we have the correct provision in schools to do that. So I really hope that the webinar gives us something to think about, something to go away and talk about with colleagues, share some of this information with others, and I really hope that we will be hearing from you after the webinar. Again, if you have any questions, we won't have time to answer questions, unfortunately, in today's webinar, but you can email your questions over to us and we will get back to you. Just before Sam begins the session, just to let you know, Sam, if you don't mind clicking on to the next couple of slides, so you can connect with us. I know many of you do, which is absolutely great, but in case you haven't seen us, we're on Twitter and you can connect with us at Veema Edu, Facebook at Veema Education, and by all means visit our website and you can subscribe to our newsletters, our free resources that we send out. If you haven't been onto our website yet, there is a whole section on there which is updated weekly on research articles, papers, resources, things that you can use and try out in the classroom. And as always, please do share these with colleagues if you find them useful. Share them, and also let us know how you found it as well, which is really important. Now, going back to today's webinar, I know Sam's gonna cover lots of important things, but the learning outcomes for today are to understand how we support SEN students and how this is changing, and how the level of support is changing, and the role of the SENCo is changing within many schools. To think about how audit and how you currently audit SEN provision in your actual schools. To establish any training requirements and to construct SEN development plans. I know Sam's going to be talking quite a lot about this. This webinar has come from our own CPD program. Sam, if you don't mind going on to the next slide for me, which is Innovating SEN Leadership. We offer training in many different ways through a series of twilights if you're in the UK, or 1 or 2 day training courses, or if you're looking for a blended program, then we can also combine this with face-to-face training as well as online training as well. And here are just some of the touch points of things that we do cover within our actual training. Sam, if you don't mind going on, because you've got the control, so you're going to have to go on to the next slide.
I've got the power.
You've got the power here. So if you can go, if you don't mind going on to the next slide. So as I said, we do deliver training courses in many different ways, and we also have premium webinars, which you can take a look at on our website. We do have a premium webinar coming up after Christmas, and our premium webinars are on our website for you to take a look and tell us what you think. I think that's enough from me. We did start slightly early, so we're going to go straight into it. I really hope you enjoy today's webinar. I'll be back at the end just to say goodnight to everyone, but over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody. It's always really disconcerting doing a webinar because I can't see my face and I can't see your faces, and it could be that nobody's there, but I do believe there are some people there. So welcome to the webinar, where I'm going to give an overview of how we really need to start thinking about SEND, and it is changing slowly, and we have to sort of be involved in implementing these changes a lot more. So my background is I was originally a music teacher, and then I became a SENCo of a very large secondary school, and I've worked with children in PRUs and children in care since then, and that sort of thing. And now I'm very lucky that I get to travel all over the world and all over the country and sound like I know what I'm talking about, which is really handy. So SEN and how we approach it in school. When I first sort of started, which obviously because I'm young wasn't that many years ago, it was very much a case of the SENCo and the SEN department was a, here they are, you fix them and then send them back to me, and everything was fine. Or if a subject is too difficult, let's take them out of that subject so they can concentrate on the other ones. And it was very much a deficit focus, what was wrong with the child rather than what was wrong with the environment. It was a high level of TA support. And even now, sort of the holy grail of SEN support is believed to be having a teaching assistant or a learning support assistant next to them, and we have to move away from that. It was a separate department, and we very much focused on improving literacy skills, the spelling. We believed that if we improved their spelling, that everything would be absolutely wonderful. If we improved their reading skills, then they wouldn't have any other problems in life and it would all be fixed. So this is changing. And we've now kind of got into a new style of SEN support where the SEN and the SENCo and whoever's involved in the SEN, whatever you're called, it has to be very much a strategic role. We have to be involved in the overview. You will be minimal contact actually with children, working with children. So whereas it used to be, you know, I used to run some nurture groups and some withdrawal groups. Very much it was more, became a strategic involvement. That was my role. We also we're going to have to start looking at staff training advice and QFT, one of the latest buzzwords, quality first teaching. We have to be a student advocate, and I'm going to go into these all a little bit more now. We also have to look at independent working and developing partnerships. So the most important thing is the strategic. In the Code of Practice in the UK, it is recommended that the SENCo is on the senior leadership team. And the reason for this is because it has to be seen as part of the whole school management structure. This isn't just an add-on. This isn't a separate department where you have responsibility for some kids. SEN has to be whole school responsibility, and you need to have a strong representation for it on the senior leadership team. And as part of that, we have to oversee all special needs provision, okay, in every department, in every aspect of the school. We have to make sure that the SEN is considered in all school development plans and all school policies. It is a policy on its own, but there also has to be consideration in every other policy that's there around. For example, the behaviour policy. So many schools ignore the SEN needs when they're thinking of behaviour systems and their punitive systems. And we have to get involved in thinking, actually, is this the right thing for our students? We also have to look at deployment of budgets and interventions. Do we have a budget? I know the SEN budget is always kind of the first that's nicked from whenever things are tight, but this is quite short-sighted thinking because we're then firefighting and spending a lot more money down the line. There's the classic upstream, downstream parable, which if you don't know about it, have a look at it and read up on it. I've sort of got my own version, but it is a very important thing, and it's about how being early intervention and spending money before we have to firefight saves us a lot of money further down the line. And we also have a role with SEN that makes sure the whole school does encompass it, that the whole school is responsible for special needs. The whole school is responsible for everybody. So when we look at interventions, we have to actually question a few things. First of all, we have to question, is the intervention that we've put in place, is it working? Because I inherited a department with some interventions that had just been done for years and actually weren't making any difference. And then we also have to question, is it the right intervention for that student? Because, for example, I had a student who'd done toe by toe for 5 years on the trot with limited improvement, and they had dyslexia. They weren't going to get any better. We had to find another way to work with them, and it wasn't the right intervention for them. We also have to look at what other interventions are available. Okay, so the DFE have published guidance, and the Education Endowment Foundation have also published fabulous guidance. And they're saying that many effective interventions have cooperative learning at their core, and the key elements are early intervention, one-to-one and or small group. So we can still do withdrawal sessions, but make sure it's using an intervention that works. Make sure we're just not trying the same thing several times with the student, okay? Because it may be that that student's not going to get any better at reading, that that student's not going to be getting any better at spelling. So let's look at actually what is the right thing for them to do. We also have to look at how we deploy teaching assistants. Now, I know in a lot of schools with short budgets, the teaching assistants are the first to be hit. It's the way of the world, it's what happens. But what is interesting actually is that there were a few studies released several years ago. The big one was the DIS report into teaching assistant use, and they found that actually teaching assistants have a negative effect on progress. If you read the whole report, I think they said it was only in year 9 that they didn't have a negative effect because of the way they worked. So what they found was that teaching assistants are very task focused. So they were very much focused on completing the task with the child and either doing it for them rather than the process of learning. And we were also not developing independent problem solving skills because you had a human being doing that for them. What's also important is that we consider the impact socially of teaching assistants, and that, for example, if you have a human being sat by you all the time, that's going to restrict your interaction with other students and your social interaction, which is a really important part of everyday school life. And friendships and social interaction is a major part of resilience in our young people. So what we have to ensure, and what you have to ensure, is are your TAs working effectively? The Education Endowment Foundation has produced a leaflet talking about making the best use of teaching assistants, and it just gives really good advice as to how you should be using teaching assistants properly. But also, we need to train our teachers into how to use the teaching assistant properly. Okay, so it's not just about training the teaching assistant, it's about training the teacher to make sure, because teaching assistants are an intervention, so we have to evaluate, are they working? We have to take guidance on them. And we also, I'm going to talk very much about speaking to the child later, but we also need to speak to the child. How is it working for you having a teaching assistant? Is there anything that maybe we could try differently? And I will come to that when we talk about independent working. So teaching assistants are an intervention, and as part of our SEN change, we have to look at how they're working and make sure that they're working effectively and not just sort of traditionally how they have been for years. We also, as part of our whole school overview, we have to be involved in all departments. Okay, so the SEN should have sort of representation and communication and partnerships with all departments in the schools, every subject department, support staff departments, because every person in that school is really important that they understand their role in supporting SEN students and how to support SEN students. Okay, so some of the most effective and best conversations I've seen with SEN students are actually by the dinner staff or by the caretakers, who have sometimes built up fabulous relationships, but not everybody knows this. So we have to be involved in all departments to make sure they all understand how they can support SEN students in their role, and that they have a responsibility to all SEN students as well. We also have to ensure that SEN students are fairly represented, okay, in all aspects of the whole school thing. So a lot of people talk to me, when I say to them, how is your pupil voice? How do you know what people say? They always say, well, we've got a student council and they feed back into us. And I say, well, is your student council elected? And I say, yeah. Then I don't think that's a representation for all students, because what's generally elected are the most popular students, and they are not approachable to your more vulnerable students, who include SEN students. Okay, so you need to make sure your percentage of SEN students in your school, do you have that percentage of representation on every school council? Okay, and then you also need to look at what is the proportion of SEN students involved in our reward systems. So are SEN students underrepresented in our award systems, in our praise point system that we have? Are SEN students overrepresented in our behaviour systems, in our absentee, in our attendance issues? What are there? In the UK at the moment, there's a lot of discussion about punitive behaviour systems and that we are unfairly punishing SEN students. They're overrepresented. And there was also a recent court case where a school was taken to court by the parent of an autistic child who had a high level of exclusions. And they said that the court said that these exclusions were unfair because it was down to their SEN. Okay, and we have to start looking at that with our strategic point of view. How are SEN students being represented in all areas of school life, in all the systems? Are they overrepresented so that they're being unfairly punished, or are they underrepresented and therefore we're not hearing their voice? We also have to ensure that basic SEN standards are used. There are so many simple things that can be done to support students with SEN. So one of the most simple things is, does your school have a standard font that it uses in all handouts, in all printouts, in all letters to home, in all reports? Does it have a standard font size, a standard spacing, and is that a dyslexia-friendly font? And if not, why not? Okay, and do you make sure that nobody sends out letters where they're justified on both sides? Okay, because that isn't dyslexia friendly anyway. And bear in mind that at least 10% of your students, and probably of your parents as well, are going to have dyslexia or literacy difficulties or things. These are very simple basics that we should be put in place. We also need to get involved in the environmental issues of the schools. Okay, so you need to go around the school from a strategic level and look at everything from the point of view of an SEN student. Can I access everything? Okay, and it's not just about physical access, it's about all the sensory issues that are involved. Classrooms. I go into a lot of classrooms, and I apologise if your classroom is like this. It's just something to think about. But when you have the wall that has your whiteboard on, that you want them to focus on, you should have nothing else on that wall. It's called visual noise, okay? And if you want them to focus on that bit, you should have nothing else on that wall, okay? So you should have a standard in classrooms that it's great having motivational posters, and it's great having, you know, reminders and vocabulary, but don't put them around the whiteboard wall, because that is visual noise that it is distracting for a whole range of SEN students on a big scale. You want to make it clear and easy to see. And in your signs around the school, are your signs for the toilets or for particular ways to go, have they got nothing else around them so that they're easy to see? Okay, so just simple things like that. That's a strategic level involvement and applying standards throughout. And you know, we like displays in education. I always remember when Ofsted was coming, the first thing we did was change our displays, because we thought it would mean that we're magically fabulous teachers and everything would be wonderful, because Ofsted would go, what a great display, that's outstanding. Okay, but it can be overwhelming for a lot of students. They did a study, actually, where they had young children, I think they were sort of infant level age, and they had a classroom full of lovely posters, and then they had another classroom full of nothing at all on the walls. The walls were bare, okay? And the children in the class with nothing on the walls made more academic progress than the children with lots of displays on their walls. Okay, so don't worry that you think it looks cold. You want the area to concentrate. And these are the things I'm talking about when we say we have to do a whole school uniform. The font size is massive. So just simple things like that. And that's why we have to start thinking strategically, because that will affect all students. Okay, so then we have to look at staff training and advice. And this is where a big area is. Your teaching staff are your first wave of SEN support. They are wave one in-class SEN support. And what they do is vital to everything. So improving their knowledge and their understanding and their abilities and their confidence, okay, is a major part of changing how we look at SEN. Teachers are teachers of all children, okay, and it's getting that mentality across, changing the mindset that actually quality first teaching and differentiation will benefit all children. Okay, it's not about just your SEN children, it's about all of the children. Okay, and you need to really be involved in that and make sure that we have compulsory staff training, that you have regular time to facilitate group workshops with staff, because that's one of the best training formats is doing group workshops with staff and saying, here's a case study, this is a child, these are their difficulties, what adaptations, what differentiation could you put in place to support this child? Because teachers learning from each other, collaborative learning is one of the best ways of learning, exactly the same way it is for students. Okay, so collaborative learning is a big issue and really helps on changing mindsets. And you also need to think, how am I accepting referrals into the SEN department? Is it somebody stopping me in a corridor? If it is, then that's not good enough. You do need to formalise your referral system and have some sort of procedure. And one of the first things you need to ask when you have any referral is you need to say, can you tell me what have you already tried and what was the result? Okay, because this is part of a reminder that you actually need to try different things anyway. And there's so many studies that show that differentiation works, that multisensory teaching works, that collaborative working works, and actually getting with children in mixed ability groups instead of setting children actually improves results a lot better as well. So there's so much. I've only got a limited amount of time, so I can't tell you everything in one go, but it's definitely something that you need to think about. So what is quality first teaching? Well, I've basically just covered a lot of it in the last slide. I think I forgot I had this slide. We are teachers of all students, okay? And differentiation isn't just about adapting something to that student. It is about providing a range of ways of learning and a range of approaches and a range of questioning and you know, giving all children the opportunity to thrive. Giving children thinking time is one of the most simplest things. Don't ask the question of the first person who puts their hand up, okay? So this is one of the biggest areas you need to get involved with, because this is the early intervention and will reduce the number of referrals that you have. And why you have to be strategic and on the SLT is because it has to be an SLT mindset that SEN and quality first teaching is the ethos of our school and what we are all aiming for, okay? Because, as I say, we are teachers of all students, not just the easy ones. And it's quite funny because I always saw it as a challenge that the more difficult, not difficult, I don't like the word difficult, but the children with more learning differences were more of a challenge to me to work with than the children who were, I don't like the word normal, but who didn't have learning differences, that they had the standard way of learning, okay? So that's what you need to think about, is quality first teaching and getting that mindset across through a variety of means. and look at the nudge effect. I really like using the nudge effect when I'm training, and the nudge effect is kind of a psychological approach that we want to know that we're making decisions that other people are making, and advertisers use it on other people to nudge you into buying that thing. And you know, an example of the nudge effect for this would be if you went back into school and you said, do you know what, I'll watch this webinar of this beautiful woman. She was stunning, but she was also very clever, and she told me that generally she has found, and there are studies to show, that teachers with a higher IQ are generally the ones that put more differentiation into their teaching in the classroom. Okay, that's called the nudge effect, because then people will think psychologically, oh, I think I've got a higher IQ actually, so I think, you know, that's something that I could do. I use it on my husband all the time. He's not listening, so we're okay. But so quality first teaching, really work with your staff. They are the first level of support that you need to have, okay? And here you have to be the student advocate, okay? So when I was in my school, I wasn't always the most popular member of staff because I was an advocate for the student, okay? And my job was to be a student representative, but also to hear the voice of the student. And so often I hear of school meetings, and we used to have them, where we'd have a meeting about the child, and we'd decide what we were putting in place, and all these things that would happen, and then we'd invite the student in and we'd tell them what we had decided. And at no point did we ask them, okay? So our job in changing how we approach special needs is for us to say, what do you want? What can I do to help you? What will help you? What is worrying you? We also have to have a big mental health awareness in here. SEN students are 6 times more likely to suffer from a mental health condition, okay, or a mental health issue, 6 times more likely. And it's all linked to self-esteem and value and worth. And again, that's a whole other webinar and training session, but we have to be aware of that, okay? Because also, one of the reasons is our SEN students can be sometimes the more socially isolated. And as I've referred to before, friendship groups are really important for positive mental well-being. And we have to challenge the mindsets, okay? We have to not be afraid to have these conversations with parents and with teachers on behalf of the child. So we have to not be afraid to say, you are the adult with a degree, therefore I expect you to make some adaptations and not continually expect the child to adapt to you, okay? Because you are the most intelligent and the highly qualified person, so you need to change how you're thinking about this, all right? And we have to change language and labeling and how we talk about it. It's a learning difference. It's not necessarily a learning difficulty. Some simple language things is, instead of using the word normal, I actually like to use the word ordinary, because if you're not normal, you're abnormal, but if you're not ordinary, you're extraordinary. And it's language like this that we have to be careful the language we use with students so that we don't affect their mental health issues and their self-esteem. And we have to say, your brain is wired differently, okay? You work differently, and these are your good things. These are your strengths. And I think that's on the next slide. No, it's not. So let's go back. Ignore I just said that. Now I've done something. Okay, so we also have to change our labeling of students. Okay, so you should have students with special needs in all your top sets, okay, because they have the knowledge and they have the ability, and we shouldn't put them in lower sets because they have the difficulty expressing it or reading it, okay? So we have to change how we think about it. There's a whole thought process around disabilities that it's not the person that's disabled, it's the environment. Okay, and that's how we kind of have to start thinking with SEN. Not that it's a pain in the backside, not that it's that we have to fix them. It's, well, what can we do to teach all students, and what can we do to support this student? And these are the things they're really good at. Okay, because labeling is really important as well, and how we think about things. So this also comes into changing the mindset. So in California, they did a study, I think, where they had 3 or 4 new classes, new elementary teachers that were given new classes. And these elementary teachers were told that in their class, they had 10 what they called intellectual bloomers, what we would call gifted and talented probably, that they are intellectual bloomers, and they drew 10 names randomly out of a hat. And they told the teaching staff, the teachers, that they were the intellectual bloomers. And at the end of the term, those 10 had made the most progress in that class because of the teacher's expectation and because of the labelling, okay, and the language that we use. So it is really important that we make everybody aware of this, and that we're aware of this as ourselves, so we're not disadvantaging and setting up more barriers for our student. We then have to look at independent working. So I am a big fan of independent working as much as possible for SEN students. My job wasn't just to prepare students to pass the GCSE, okay? My job was to prepare that student for life, okay? So that they can live their life. And so strategies and things I put in place for them, I wanted them to enable them for their life, not put more barriers in their way. So when they leave school at 16 and they don't have that human TA, they're like, what am I supposed to do now? There's also a lot of research that shows that promoting independent working improves social standing, removes barriers, academic performance, motivation and confidence, okay, which is linked to self-esteem and is linked to mental health illnesses, okay. You need to have conversations with students. Metacognition is really important for SEN students, to understand what their differences are and what their strengths are, okay? And as I say, you've got to prepare them for life after school. So how can we do that? I've already mentioned metacognition. You've also got to train teachers and teaching staff to have conversations of, I can't do it. Okay, well, how would you be able to do it? What can I give you to help you be able to do it? Is there another way you could do it instead? Okay, so that they learn to work with their differences and what works for them. Look at what support is provided for them. Is it going to be available in the next chapter of their life? Okay, if it's not, then I am disabling further and putting up further barriers for the next chapter of their life, and I'm doing short-term thinking. Also, is there an alternative? Look at assistive technology. I'm a massive fan of assistive technology. I use my phone, I use spell checker now. I've just discovered Microsoft Dictate, so I'm writing my book doing that, so I don't have to type it in. It's wonderful. And assistive technology can be massive for SEN students. So look at that. Also train staff not to be task focused, but to use sort of Socratic questioning. How could you do that? How could you achieve that? And again, ask the student, what can I do to help you? And we also, as part of this, do have to work as parents, with parents, because they love their child lots and lots, more than anybody else, and they will want the easiest route for their child. So we will have to work with them saying, look, the easiest route is to do this for them, but in the long term, that might not be the right thing for them. And actually, by doing this with them and then learning independent working, we're giving them the tools and the strategies to be a lot more successful, okay, when they leave school. We also have to develop partnerships. I think when you're involved in SEN in the school, you know the most people around the school, okay? We develop partnerships with external agencies. And that's challenging for everybody, no matter where you are. So I know working with schools abroad, there are very limited external agencies that you can work with sometimes, and it's very much internal. You have those things as well. And in the UK, budgets are being constricted, so there's less available as an external agency there. But what is there, we need to work with and to work out how we can work best with them and make the most use of them. I've seen a talk by somebody, and he believes that basically developing positive relationships with people is the key to everything, and I'm inclined to agree with that. One of my favourite saying is, you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. We also have to develop positive partnerships and relationships with parents, because all the research shows that positive parent involvement always has the best outcome involved. Okay, we may not always disagree with that parent the best approach, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it and sometimes challenge parents. And I know this is a big issue for a lot of schools abroad as well, in that parents are, I don't know, afraid, or they find it difficult to accept that the child has a special educational need. And that can prove challenging. But again, we just need to use the language of it. You know, we just need to say, I want to work with them to personalise their learning and to support them the best way that they can, because this is what they're really, really good at. We don't have to tell them, I think your child has an SEN, or I think your child has this label at that, if it's not going to work towards developing a positive relationship. It's quite funny because I've worked with parents at both ends of the spectrum, and I'm sure that you have as well. You have parents at one end of the spectrum that there's nothing wrong with my child. You just need to teach them better, or they just need to work harder, excuse me, or they're just being lazy. And then you have parents at the other end of the spectrum who would like every diagnosis going for their child. So that means that anything that is a result of the child is nothing to do with their parenting skills. So, and they both have the same fears, that they want what is best for their child. Okay, so we have to develop partnerships with parents. We also have to develop positive partnerships with other schools. Okay, there can be sometimes a little bit of a competitive edge, but it's really important for SEN that we do develop partnerships with other schools. We have to share good practice. And also for your mental health, working in SEN, you may be the only person doing that role in a school, and that can be really isolating. So networking is good for your mental health and your knowledge, and it's good just to get together to go, oh, isn't it rubbish? Yeah, it is rubbish, and this is getting on my nerves. Yeah, and me, and I feel better for just moaning about it. So work together with other schools and share your knowledge with each other. So what I always say is, on any SENCo training, is if you are becoming a SENCo or you're working in SEN, you can't be an expert in everything. You can't be knowledgeable about every SEN, okay, every illness, every condition, every disease. We all have areas where we're more drawn to and we feel more experts in it, but we do have to know where to access that expertise and that knowledge and those resources. And part of that is developing partnerships with other schools and external agencies as well. So then we come to the final part of it, is looking at where you are now, okay? Because sometimes it can be feeling a little bit overwhelming of, I have so much to do and I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know how to do it, or where do I start? Before you can start planning, you need to look at where you are now, okay? What is our current SEN provision? How are we managing it currently? So first of all, what are your highest levels of need? So do you have a higher number of autistic spectrum students in your school? Do you have a higher number of dyslexic students in your school? ADHD students in your school? The whole host, you know, there's the top 3 that I can think of. But do you have a particular prevalence of 1 or 2 or 3 areas of special need that are your high level of need, and that potentially you're not doing very well with those students? You then have to look at what provision do we have at each wave? What do we have that's available at wave 1, 2 and 3? Wave 1 is in-class support. Okay, so wave 1 is about what takes place in the classroom. Wave 2 is about sort of withdrawal outside of the classroom, so interventions, withdrawal groups, lunchtime clubs, anything like that. What are we putting in place? Okay, and actually that's just reminded me is, you know, we talked about the whole school provision and the environmental planning, is there must be a safe place for students to go during break times and lunch times, or when they're feeling overwhelmed and they're experiencing sensory overload, and they must have a safe place where they can go and just calm down, okay, or just de-stress themselves, because as adults we have this ability and we need to provide that with students as well. Okay, so in my office nobody was allowed to come into my office and reprimand or shout at any child, because that was the safe zone where they were, and they could just sit. Okay, anyway, so back to, so wave 1's of provision is, wave 1 is in-class support, wave 2 is out-of-class support, and wave 3 is external agency support. So what do you have that's available there? You then have to look at what is working and what isn't working, and you have to be brutally honest. Okay, are these interventions working? Are these teaching styles working? Do we have a big red light area where there's an issue? Okay, with teaching it. I have a thing about PE teachers. Anybody that sees me knows that I kind of have a joke thing about PE teachers, but it would be that, do our PE teachers understand how to support our autistic spectrum students? Okay, as you can see, I'm not an athletic person. I think it's a psychological thing. But moving on from that, what is working and what isn't working? And one of the best ways that you can find this out is actually to produce surveys. And I like anonymous surveys, because if you really want to know what people think, they have to be able to say it without any comeback. Okay, so produce an anonymous survey of the teaching staff. What are your concerns? What do you feel your level of knowledge is? What can I do to help you? What causes you the most stress? You know, what training would you like next? Ask the students as well. You can contact them and say, what can I do to help you? How do you feel you're being treated with your SEN? What issues are there concerning you? How is your mental health? Okay, and then contact parents as well. You know, how are they at home? Because it's very common knowledge that for ASD students, they could be absolutely fine in school, but they're building up and up like this bucket to sensory overload, and then they'll get home and it will all come out. Okay, so we need to know things from that, from parents. Are you having difficulties at home that are potentially caused by what's happening in school? Do you feel supported? Do you feel we could do things better for your child? Okay, so those are really good ways of checking what is working and what isn't working. And again, we talked about at the beginning, and look at the representation of SEN throughout the school. How is that? Is that a big red flag? Do you have a massively low representation of SEN students in your award scheme? Then what are you going to do about that? Do you have a massively high representation of students being sent to the behaviour unit or being subject to punitive measures or exclusions? If you do, then that is a red flag area that we need to address and we need to look at. Okay? Do you have difficulty supplying TAs for the number of students that have the need? If so, what else can we put in place to support the student to work independently? And once you've gathered all this information, Okay, look up provision maps and put it on a provision map, which is like a posh word for a spreadsheet, really. And it will be quite clear immediately to see where all the gaps are, to see what is your highest area of need. And I would like to suggest that staff training has to be one of the top ones. They are your front line, they are your soldiers, okay? And by training them, you will achieve a lot more and hit a lot more students than you by working with students individually or in small groups, okay? So, you know, it's very difficult in a short webinar to give you a whole list of things to work at, and if it's something you want help with, then at Veema we're really good at doing that. We come in and help you with that and with the training. But this is just a very basic introduction for you to start thinking, what do I need to do first? And don't be overwhelmed. You're not going to be able to make massive changes all in one go, okay? But if you have a plan and you start working at it and you start taking small steps, then things will change, okay? With any inspection, so when I talk to people about offset inspections, don't pretend. Know what's working, know what's not working, and what you're going to do about it. Okay, so and if you're doing stuff well, what are you going to develop next? Well done. That's a really good thing. So I think that's come to the end of my webinar. It was a whistle-stop tour of changing how we think. I hope that I've given you things to think about, and just to change mindsets is what we have to do, is to change our mindsets with regarding SEN. Learning differences, okay, and how we think about that and what we can do about it. I think Costa might pop in at some point now.
Hello there, I'm back.
Hiya.
Thank you very much. That was exceptional. I've had so many messages. We've had so many messages come in the last 50 minutes to just say, you know, they resonate with everything you're saying. Some really good takeaways, and just, you know, listening myself, I just think it's amazing how much you can take away. And I hope people feel this at home or wherever you're listening to this, how much you can take away in 50 minutes. And like I said, these webinars are an opportunity to share some ideas, to give teachers or school leaders an insight into things that they could try out and see whether they work, and just a bit of reflective time as well, which I think as practitioners is really, really important. If you've missed any part of this webinar, you'll be pleased to know that it will be on our website in the next couple of days. So please do, if you did miss anything, or you'd like to listen to it again, or you think that colleagues in your school would need to listen to this, then please do guide them to our website, and you can listen to this webinar as well as all our free webinars that we deliver every month. And our next one you can see on the screen will be on the 11th of December, and it will be on safeguarding, which there are some similarities there as well. Everything we've spoken about today go back to safeguarding and some of the things we spoke about at the beginning of the webinar. Also, if you do want, if this has left you thinking that maybe you would want more, or you're thinking of training for the spring or summer term, then do go onto our website and have a look at what we're offering at the moment. We can deliver training in your school, but I know that we have so many international schools that are tuning into this webinar this evening. We also deliver bespoke webinars as well as the face-to-face training. So do get in touch with us if you would like to know more about what we do. Thank you from me, Sam. That again, it was absolutely great. Thank you everyone who's tuned in, because I know there's just been so many of you. I hope you have a really good evening, and we look forward to seeing you on the 11th of December. Good night.